Good morning, y'all. Thank you for joining me for some Real Talk from the Heart this morning. This morning's Real Talk is from the book of Haggai, chapter 2, verse 4. Haggai, chapter 2, verse 4. This is what the word of the Lord says. Yet now be strong, Zerubbabel, says Yahweh, and be strong, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and be strong, all you people of the land, says Yahweh, and work, for I am with you, says Yahweh of hosts. This passage here, of course, is dealing with the Babylonian exile being passed and the people returning to the covenant land, the holy land, and they've been given the responsibility to rebuild the temple, right? To get to work in rebuilding the house of God. But sadly, after 16 years, little progress had been made. Why? Well, because the people began to put their own personal interests, their own personal priorities ahead of God's work. And again, I would encourage you to read Haggai, those two chapters, 1 and 2. And in chapter 1, the Lord says a couple times, right, consider your ways. And what were the ways that God's people were to consider? It was really their priorities. They were putting personal interests, personal pleasures, personal things above the work of God. And so what was happening is that the work of God was being hindered. The progress of the work of the Lord was being hindered. And so what did they need? Well, the Lord sends the prophet Haggai with what I call a right now word, right? What do I mean by a right now word? He says it right here, yet now, right? Yet now. So there's a change there, man. There's a shift where it's like, okay, you've been doing this, right? That's been your priority. That's been your preference. But from now on, be strong. Be strong. And he says it to Zerubbabel, says it to Joshua, says it to all the people. And then after he tells them to be strong, he says this, because I'm with you. Because I'm with you. Right? So be strong and work, God says, because I'm with you. I like the fact that it doesn't say work for the Lord, but really the idea is work with the Lord. And so they needed that right now word from the Lord. Be strong in the Lord and get back to work with him. Get back to work with the Lord. Leave the captivity behind, right? You're not there anymore. That's not you anymore. You're not in bondage anymore. Leave that behind and get to work with the Lord. What put him into captivity in the beginning? Listen, disobedience, idolatry, and immorality. He says, leave that behind. You can't go back. You can't do anything about your past. You can't do anything about your failure, but leave it behind. And listen, renew your commitment to the work of the Lord. And so now is the time. Now is the time to make the most of our time, our God-given time, listen, to work with the Lord. Now is not the time to do nothing. Now is not the time to do as little as possible. Now is the time to put our hands to the plow and get busy and get to work with the Lord. And maybe you would say, man, I remember a time in my life where, man, I was about that. Man, I'd given my life to the Lord. I was giving myself to the service of the Lord, serving his people. But maybe your heart's kind of cooled off, and now you find yourself not serving in anything. I mean, one of the areas of ministry, you guys, that is most important in the house of God is children's ministry. And I've talked to many pastors, many churches, and one of the areas where they struggle to get people to volunteer or people to work in the ministry is children's ministry. And now let me tell you, man, I want to tell you why that is such a dangerous thing, is because children are the future of the church. And so if children aren't being raised up and discipled in the things of God, who's going to take over the church in the future? A lot of these churches are dying off because they don't have a youth ministry, they don't have children's ministry. And so you think, well, why not? Well, a couple of factors. There may not be young families there with kids. There may not be families there with youth. But And other factors, guys, listen, they're just not people stepping up. There are people who have placed their personal priorities and preferences above serving in the house of God, and so there is not the people to do it. And so and that is just across the board, man. Worship ministry, children's ministry, right, facilities, all kinds of things where it's just not people stepping up. So, now is the time, man. Now is the time. The Lord says, be strong and get to work. Why? What's the incentive? What's the motivation? He says, because I'm with you. And you are actually my co-laborer, God says. You're actually my co-worker. And so maybe you need to just pray, Lord, renew my strength. Man, maybe you got tired in it. Maybe you got burned out in it, as they say. Maybe the prayer is, Lord, renew my strength for the ministry. Lord, renew my commitment to your work, God. Pray that. Maybe that's what you need to do. Man, go to your pastor, go to the leadership of the church you attend and say, look, I want to serve. Is there anything I can do? Right? What are the areas of need in this ministry? Pray for the Lord's strength. Pray for the Lord's renewed, right, commitment from your part. And get busy, y'all. Listen. Now, be strong. And get to work for the Lord, man. Time's running out, man. It's ticking. It's getting late. Now's not the time to be preoccupied with personal pleasures and personal priorities to the neglect of the work of God. The Lord loves you. I love you too. Praying for you. Please be praying for me as well. Man, I hope you have a great Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. And I hope that you'll be in the house of God. But not just be there, that you'll be there worshiping, studying His Word, and serving God's people where you're at. Talk to you guys tomorrow.